Footsteps struck the frozen stones of Castle Valerith, each one swallowed by a silence that felt less like peace and more like a held breath. Something in that silence did not belong, though no one walking those halls that night would have guessed how completely it was about to unmake them. The iron gates of the inner ward groaned shut behind the last column of returning soldiers. King Ronan Vos had come home. To the kingdoms beyond Valerith's borders, his name was a warning whispered before sieges and shouted in surrender. Ronan was no ordinary monarch. His line carried the old blood, the gift and burden of the wolf, and he wore the title Alpha King the way other men wore scars, visibly, permanently, without choice. 3 months of war against the rebel clans of the eastern passes had ended in victory. It had also ended, somewhere along the frozen ridgelines, with something inside him going quiet that he could not name. In the great hall, his warriors toasted his name. Firelight, mead, and laughter spilled from the windows, bleeding into the courtyard, like warmth he could no longer reach. Nobles would want his attention by morning. Petitions, treaties, the endless arithmetic of holding a kingdom together. Tonight, though, none of it called to him louder than the silence beyond the castle walls. He turned from the hall and walked instead toward the old royal barn, set apart near the edge of the grounds, where stable hands had long since learned not to follow him. The barn had always been the one place his crown couldn't reach. The air cooled as he crossed the yard, snow crunching beneath his boots, lantern light flickering gold against drifts that had buried the world since dusk. He breathed in the scent that waited for him beyond those doors. Hay, leather, old wood, the warm musk of horses settling for the night. It had grounded him since he was a boy too small to lift his father's sword. He needed that grounding now, more than he needed any feast. He pushed the heavy doors open and stopped. Beneath the hay and leather, something else moved through the air. Sharp, copper, unmistakable. Blood. Beneath that, something wilder still. Fur and musk, the unmistakable signature of a wolf that did not belong to him, or to any wolf sworn to his kingdom. Before we continue, please hit the subscribe and like button, and tell me which city you're tuning in from. I love to know where this story found you. Now let's dive in. Ronan's golden eyes sharpened in the dark. Every instinct honed by months of war rose at once, the wolf inside him surging toward the surface, demanding answers. No creature crossed into Valerith's walls without his knowledge. No wolf set foot on his territory and lived to explain why, not unless he allowed it. His hand found the hilt of his sword before his mind had finished the thought. Steel slid free with a low hiss, and he advanced into the dark with the silence of a man who had killed before and would again without hesitation, if the night demanded it. He followed the scent past the empty stalls, past a black warhorse stamping uneasily in its pen, toward the far corner, where the lantern light barely reached. The light caught movement first. Fur, pale silver grey, thick as a winter cloud bank, rising and falling with slow, deliberate breath. Then he saw her. A woman lay curled in the hay, copper hair spilling loose across her shoulders, her plain dress torn at the sleeve, her hands raw, as though she'd crawled farther than her body had any right to carry her. She didn't stir. Whatever had brought her here had taken the last of her strength to do it, and standing over her, between her and the door, between her and him, was the wolf. It was enormous, larger than any wolf born in Valerith's forests, its coat catching the lantern light like frost on stone, its lips drawn back from teeth built for killing. Its eyes, when they found Ronan's, held no fear at all, only warning. Ronan's gaze dropped, and understanding hit him a heartbeat too late. The wolf's belly hung heavy and round beneath her. She was pregnant, close to her time by the look of her, and she had placed her own body, vulnerable and burdened, between a stranger and an armed king, rather than save herself. That made no sense to him. Wolves did not die for humans. Certainly not for ones they had no claim over. Move away from her, Ronan said, low and even, command bred into his voice by right of blood. The wolf answered with a growl that rattled the rafters. He pressed harder, releasing the weight of his alpha will into the room. The invisible force every wolf in his kingdom had been born knowing how to obey. Submit. Her paws dug into the dirt. Her whole body shook with the effort of resisting him. And still, Impossibly, she didn't move. She only stepped closer to the woman in the hay, lowering her head over her like a shield of muscle and fur, ready to die exactly where she stood. For the first time since the war had ended, Ronan felt something other than exhaustion. He felt astonishment. A ragged breath broke the tension. The woman's eyes opened, unfocused, then sharpened with fear, as they found the king standing over her with a drawn sword. "Please," she whispered, forcing herself up on shaking arms, dragging her body in front of the wolf instead of behind it. "Don't hurt her. She saved my life." Ronan's sword lowered an inch without his permission. "What is your name?" She hesitated, as though the answer cost her something. "Bianca." One word. That was all it took. The moment her name left her lips, something ancient stirred awake inside him. A recognition no crown, no war, no winter had prepared him for. The bond every alpha both longed for and feared settled over him like a verdict handed down by the gods themselves. His fated mate was not a noblewoman waiting in some southern court. She was a stranger, half-starved in his own barn, guarded by a wolf that should not exist, carrying secrets that would soon unravel everything Ronan believed about his brother, his throne, and the war he thought he had already won. He had walked into the barn searching for an hour of silence. He had found, instead, the beginning of everything. The bond did not loosen its grip simply because Ronan willed it to. He stood there a moment longer than a king should, sword still lowered, eyes still locked on the woman who had just upended everything he understood about fate. Then duty reasserted itself, the way it always did, smothering wonder beneath necessity. "You cannot stay in this barn," he said. "Either of you." The wolf's growl had not fully faded, but it had dulled to something watchful rather than violent. Bianca struggled to her knees, one hand pressed to the wolf's flank, as though to steady them both. "She won't let you take me anywhere," Bianca warned. "She will, if you ask her to." It was not a question. Bianca studied him for a long moment, too long for a frightened servant girl, too steady for someone who should have been begging for her life. Then she turned and murmured something low against the wolf's ear, and the great beast's shoulders eased, though her golden eyes never once left the king. Ronan led them through the servants' passage rather than the main hall, unwilling to explain a pregnant wolf to half his court before he understood it himself. He brought them to a locked chamber in the old east wing, far from prying eyes, and set guards he trusted at the door. Though trust, he was beginning to suspect, was a luxury he could no longer afford carelessly. Inside, by firelight, he finally looked at her properly. Even ragged and starved, there was something in the line of her spine that didn't belong to a farmhand. "Your name is Bianca," he said. "What else? Does it matter?" "It matters to the man whose barn you collapsed in." She wrapped her arms around herself, and for the first time, he saw not fear but calculation. A woman deciding how much truth she could afford to spend. "I worked the Hollow Farms, 3 days south of here. That's all you need to know." "That is not all I need to know." He crossed the room slowly, the way he might approach a cornered animal, though he suspected she would not appreciate the comparison. A farmhand does not carry herself like she's used to being obeyed. A farmhand does not stare down an alpha king without flinching. Something cracked behind her eyes. Just a hair's width, but he caught it. "My name," she said finally, "was Bianca Everwyn." The name meant nothing to him at first, and then, slowly, it meant everything. The Everwyns had once held the Western Valleys, lands rich enough to rival a duchy, loyalty old enough to predate his own father's reign. He hadn't heard the name spoken in years, not since the scandal. "Your father was executed for treason he never committed." Her voice didn't break, but it came close. "They said he sold border maps to the rebel clans. They never proved it. They didn't need to. My cousin needed our lands, and a dead traitor's daughter doesn't inherit anything." Darius Malvern. A flicker of surprise crossed her face that he knew the name. "He sent men after me within a week of the execution. I cut my hair. I burned anything that marked me as nobility. I learned to disappear into kitchens and stables where no one looks twice at a girl, with dirt under her nails." She glanced toward the wolf, who had settled near the hearth, but kept one eye on Ronan regardless. "I found her 3 months ago, caught in a hunter's snare, half-starved, pregnant, and dying. I had nothing. No food worth sharing, no shelter worth offering, and I gave her what little I had anyway. Why? Because no one was going to do it for her. I understood that better than most. Ronan said nothing for a long moment. He had seen soldiers break under siege, watched nobles betray their own blood for an inch of land. And yet here was a woman, with nothing left to her name, who had bled herself dry for a dying animal that owed her nothing in return. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, not with hunger or aggression, but with something far more unsettling. Protectiveness. The same instinct that had once made him stand over fallen soldiers on the battlefield, refusing to let the enemy take what remained of them. "You hide pain well," he said quietly. "Better than most queens I've met." "I'm not a queen." "No," he agreed. "You're something else entirely. I haven't decided what yet." She looked away, and he let the silence stretch, studying the careful way she held her shoulders, the practiced stillness of someone who had spent months teaching her body not to flinch at sudden movement. Whatever she had survived, it had cost her more than she would admit. He almost let it rest there. Almost. "My brother,"